dapat terlaksana dengan baik. Dan tentu saja apresiasi setinggi-tinggi. Akhir kata, saya berharap kegiatan ini dapat memberikan manfaat sebesar-besarnya bagi praktik klinis kita semua. Semoga ilmu yang diperoleh hari ini menjadi bekal dalam meningkatkan kualitas pelayanan kepada masyarakat. Terima kasih banyak. Wassalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh.
Kepada Farel Muhammad Arkan, Sarjana Kedokteran, atas sambutannya. Acara selanjutnya adalah sambutan dari Dekan Fakultas Kedokteran Universitas Islam Indonesia, Dr. Isnati Miladiah, Magister Kesehatan. Pada Dekan yang terhormat, kami persilakan.
Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Salam sejahtera untuk kita semua. Kita dipertemukan di dalam forum kegiatan yang diselenggarakan oleh Fakultas Kedokteran UII, terutama oleh adik-adik mahasiswa bersama tim CME FKUII, yaitu suatu kegiatan yang dilaksanakan untuk kita nanti bersama-sama mengedukasi dan berdiskusi bersama untuk memecahkan satu masalah yang cukup krusial di negara kita. Hadirin sekalian, para narasumber, tamu undangan, kemudian juga para peserta seminar yang berbahagia, hari ini akan hadir sebagian besar narasumber kita adalah narasumber yang sangat berpengalaman, praktek di bidangnya masing-masing, yang kita akan berbagi, kita akan sharing berbagai permasalahan, terutama terkait dengan diabetes mellitus dan endokrinopati yang timbul sebagai akibat dari penyakit diabetes mellitus. Sebagaimana kita ketahui bahwa diabetes mellitus merupakan suatu penyakit kronis yang ternyata prevalensinya semakin meningkat dan insidensi pun juga semakin meningkat. Oleh karena itu, menjadi tanggung jawab kita bersama untuk bersama-sama menjadi solusi atas permasalahan tersebut, dan ini merupakan salah satu ikhtiar dari FKUII untuk kita mendiseminasikan, mengedukasi masyarakat, serta nanti menjadikan forum ini sebagai forum membagi keterampilan kita semua dan para narasumber dengan ilmunya masing-masing akan dapat tentang bagaimana kondisi diabetes mellitus saat ini. Semoga kegiatan ini dapat menjadi forum kita bersama untuk nanti membuat suatu rumusan ataupun suatu gerakan bersama bagian dari solusi permasalahan diabetes mellitus ini di masyarakat. Terima kasih kepada para narasumber yang sudah berkenan berbagi, kepada para peserta, dan juga kepada segenap panitia termasuk adik-adik yang menjadi panitia inti di dalam kegiatan CMI ini. Semoga memberikan pengalaman berharga di dalam mengorganisir suatu kegiatan. Juga kepada para peserta, terima kasih sudah berkenan untuk bergabung join di acara ini, dan insya Allah ini menjadi jalan bagi kita semua untuk berkolaborasi, kemudian membagikan ilmu kita kepada masyarakat sekitar. Selamat mengikuti seminar, semoga semua mendapatkan manfaat besar dari kegiatan ini. Wassalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh.
Peserta wajib mengisi pre-test dan post-test yang akan dibagikan via Zoom.
Yang keenam, sertifikat akan dibagikan kepada peserta yang registrasi dan mengikuti acara, dibuktikan dan pengisian.
Yang terakhir, sertifikat akan dikirimkan setelah acara berlangsung melalui mail masing-masing. dilaksanakan selama 5 menit. Selamat mengerjakan. pesan-pesan.
Dia bukan hanya kepala keluarga, dia suami yang selalu bisa membagi waktu untuk istri dan anaknya.
Selama ini, aku selalu memastikan mereka baik-baik aja. Tapi kalau aku pergi, siapa yang jaga mereka? Sebelum semuanya terlambat, aku memilih untuk melindungi mereka, menyiapkan segalanya, bahkan ketika nanti aku tiada.
Arunika menjaga hari ini, mewariskan cahaya esok untuk keluarga.
Dr. Keziki Dias merupakan alumni Fakultas Kedokteran Universitas Indonesia dengan pengalaman klinis di fasilitas kesehatan. Beliau memiliki latar belakang kuat dalam kegiatan laboratorium serta penelitian ilmiah di bidang kesehatan. Selain dunia medis, beliau juga aktif sebagai konten kreator edukatif dan musisi. Dr. Keziki memiliki rekam jejak organisasi yang luas, mencakup aktivitas relawan, penelitian, dan seni. Ia mengikuti berbagai pelatihan klinik, konferensi kesehatan berskala nasional, internasional, memiliki beberapa publikasi dan prestasi akademik maupun non-akademik. Assalamualaikum dokter, selamat pagi dok. Selamat pagi dokter Keziki. Pagi dokter.
Halo, selamat pagi.
Pagi dokter.
Ya,
Baru masuk dokter.
iya baru di unmute tadi.
Oke. Bagaimana kabarnya dokter?
Alhamdulillah baik.
Alhamdulillah.
Gimana kabarnya?
Alhamdulillah kami di sini juga baik dokter.
Alhamdulillah.
Terima kasih banyak dokter atas untuk waktu yang sudah disempatkan.
Sama-sama.
Sama lagi dokter, para peserta juga sudah tidak sabar nih dok. Persilakan dok.
Oke. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Good morning, distinguished colleagues, honored guests, and dear participants. Welcome to the first session of Glucose, Generating Literacy on Understanding Consequences of Sugar Endocrinopathy. My name is Dr. Keziki, and it is an honor for me to be the moderator for the first session. So in this session, we will be having two different experts with different sub-themes discussing about diabetes in children and adolescents, and then it will be followed by a Q&A session after both presentations. So if you have any questions during the presentation, you can save it up for the Q&A session later on. And as we all know, diabetes among children and adolescents has become a major public health concern in Indonesia. Type 1 diabetes, often known as diabetic ketoacidosis, while monogenic forms are associated with malnutrition, requiring updated and improved diagnostic tools. So to challenge, we bring together two leading experts who will share insights from worldwide patterns to practical steps for Indonesia. For the first session, it is my honor to introduce our speaker, Professor Nihal Thomas. He will be presenting about the latest global trends and statistics in diabetes, discuss the rationale behind the updated diabetes classification, including type 5 diabetes, in diagnosis, treatment, and patient care, and he will also emphasize the crucial role of international organizations like International Diabetes Federation or IDF in shaping global diabetes care. Before inviting Professor Nihal to share his experience, we'll briefly introduce his remarkable qualifications and background. So, Professor Nihal Thomas is a senior professor of endocrinology at Christian Medical College, Vellore, India. He is also the principal coordinator of ICMR Collaborating Center for Diabetes and the head of Center for Stem Cell Research. Currently, he already has more than 400 PubMed Index publications, and he also has more than 70,000 Google Citation Index. His areas of interest involve the pathogenesis of diabetes in India and general endocrinology. He has given more than 30 orations, including M.A. Sahuja, Subhas Mukherjee, South Asian Federation of Endocrinology, and East African Diabetes Society. Professor Nihal also generated about $9 million in research grants and has received numerous prestigious awards, to list a few: Tamil Nadu Medical Council Award for Medical Excellence in 2022, Dr. M. Medical University Annual Research Day Faculty Award in 2024, Medical Research Excellence Award for Diabetes in 2024, Lord Yedenapalli Award for Outstanding Researcher in 2009, Best Undergraduate Teacher Award for the year of 2023. Under his leadership, the department was also recognized by the BMJ for Diabetology Team of the Year in 2015 and the Royal College of Physicians Award for Excellence in Teaching and Training in the year of 2017. So without further ado, I invite Professor Nihal to commence his presentation. Professor Nihal, the floor is yours.
Pelanggan yang kami hormati, sesaat lagi kita akan tiba di stasiun Watas. Bagi Anda yang akan mengakhiri perjalanan di stasiun Watas, persiapkan diri Anda, periksa dan teliti kembali barang bawaan Anda. Untuk keselamatan Anda, dilarang membuka pintu kereta sebelum kereta api berhenti dengan sempurna. Terima kasih atas kepercayaan Anda pada PT Kereta Api Indonesia. Sampai jumpa di perjalanan berikutnya. Dear passengers, in a few moments, we will arrive at Watas Station. If you end your trip at Watas Station, please prepare yourself and check your luggage. For your own safety, it is forbidden
Mungkin
to
kesibukan
open the train
sekarang
door
saya
before the
lagi
train
bekerja
completely
di
stops.
rumah sakit.
Thank you for choosing PT
udah datang.
Kereta Api
Halo, good morning,
Indonesia.
Professor Nihal.
See you on the next trip.
Professor?
Hey, good, thank you.
Yes. I think we've already introduced you before, so you can actually start now. Thank you for coming today.
Sure. Thank you so much.
Pelanggan yang
And good
kami
morning to all of
hormati,
you at
pintu
Indonesia.
keluar berada di sebelah
It's been such a
kiri
pleasure and thank you for the
dari arah
invitation
kedatangan
and
kereta.
enabling me to give this
Dear
talk.
passengers,
Um,
the exit door is on the left of the train's arrival. Thank you.
Yeah. I hope you can see my slides. Yeah. Can you see my slides?
Yes, yes.
Sure. Thank you. So, thank you so much. I'm going to be talking to you about young onset diabetes and what is relevant to what we see across South Asia and East Asia. There's a lot of similarity in the conditions that we visualize over here today. And so as instructed, I'll be focusing a lot on this entity which has been recently labeled as type 5 diabetes and monogenic diabetes, and I'm going to give an overview about this condition. I'll be talking about a little bit about the epidemiology, the differential diagnosis of lean diabetes, also talking about malnutrition, its impact on how it might cause diabetes, and what we call type 5 diabetes today. So if you look at the global burden of disease study, this is probably one of the most comprehensive studies which has been done in the world, published in 2023. It gives you an estimate 530 million patients with diabetes and about 1,300 million patients by the year 2050. And that would actually be a huge number. Out of this, approximately 1 to 3%, depending on which part of the world you are, would be young onset diabetes, diabetes below the age of 25 years or 30 years of age. The WHO classification, which had come up in 2019, had settled diabetes under various conditions, and you have, of course, type 1 and type 2, hybrid forms, other specific types, and unclassified diabetes. So these are the classification of diabetes, and you can see under this a large variety of forms over there, and I'm going to be covering particularly the lean forms of diabetes. Now this is a part of India which is the eastern part. One part is next to the border of Bangladesh, and the other part is next to the border of China. And the populations here are actually Mongoloid populations. What we found is in rural areas there was a very high prevalence of diabetes, 9% in one region, and the other part was almost 5%. But what was striking is that 23% in one region and 20% in the other region had a BMI less than 18.5 kg per meter squared. Now if you look at this, when you see these patients, a large volume of them would be on oral anti-diabetic agents. So the physician would make a diagnosis of type 2 diabetes. But are they really type 2 diabetes? So the question is, when you see a patient who has a BMI less than 18.5 or less than 20, ask the question, are you dealing with a different form of diabetes, and is it truly type 2 diabetes? So what is young? An age less than 30 years for the study. What is lean? A BMI less than 18.5 according to the WHO, which classifies undernutrition as less than 18.5. Of course, at different ages, things can vary. That's a photograph of me at the age of 18 years with a BMI of 18.5. Now, perhaps I do look similar to what you can see in the photograph, but on the other hand, my BMI was 18.5, but I was not malnourished. So when you talk about BMI, it could be related to puberty, it could be related to age-related cutoffs, and we have to be very careful about that. Anyway, depending on the population, South Asian population, a BMI less than 19.2 is definitely lean. When it comes to a white Caucasian population or a black population, it could be very different. So let's go into the differential diagnosis of lean diabetes. And this is what I would do to perceive as the differential diagnosis for people who have low BMI, less than 18.5 kg per meter squared, less than 19 kg per meter squared. Type 1 diabetes is no doubt the most common, and when they come older, beyond the age of 30, we call it slowly evolving immune-mediated diabetes. It is autoimmune. It can come later, and some can come even in their 50s or 60s. Within 2 years of time, they need insulin after being on oral anti-diabetic agent. The other conditions that I'd like to highlight are fibrocalcific pancreatic diabetes, very important in this part of the world. Monogenic beta cell dysfunction, largely autosomal dominant inherited patterns, could be in some, lipodystrophy, Wolfram syndrome, HIV lipodystrophy, and then will come to type 5 diabetes. So the green ones I put as more common, the blue ones I put as more uncommon, relatively less common. Right? So when we see our patients, this is how we approach them. We take a detailed history, we do a pedigree chart, and we do a physical examination. And this is really important as a physician. Check the fasting C-peptides. So the C-peptides are an indicator of measurement of beta cell function. Check the antibody body-driven diabetes, important, the autoimmune form of diabetes. We can do body composition using either a DEXA or a bioimpedance to measure the percentage of body fat in the body. An ultrasound or a CT. A CT is much better to look at the pancreatic structure, and I'll tell you when that's required. And genetic testing when it's indicated. Okay, so type 1 is slowly evolving immune-mediated diabetes. They have a lean BMI. They have no signs of insulin resistance. You know, the acanthosis nigricans of the neck. Their C-peptides are low, and the antibodies, the GAD antibody or the IA2 antibody are positive. So that's important to check that when the C-peptides are low. And the pancreas on imaging is normal. So these patients, when they're older, have a little bit of biochemical insulin resistance. But they have to be managed like type 1 diabetes. You have to give them insulin 4 times a day. The basal bolus regimen for insulin, even if they're older, has to be given for them, otherwise they won't get controlled, and they are prone for ketoacidosis. That is really important for you to understand. I'm not going to talk too much about that because it's a complete parcel by itself, but I will talk next about fibrocalculus pancreatic diabetes. So here's a 33-year-old gentleman, laborer, comes with abdominal pain radiating to the back, loss of weight about 10 kilograms in 6 months, no gastrointestinal disturbances, diabetes for 3 years on oral anti-diabetic agents, no history of diabetic ketoacidosis even when not on insulin, not on treatment, and no history of alcohol ingestion. So on imaging of the abdomen, because of abdominal pain, you can see that the pancreas is shrunken and there is large calculi, pancreatic calculi, stones inside the duct of the pancreas. The duct is grossly dilated as well. So this patient has what is called fibrocalculus pancreatic diabetes. They usually have malabsorption, but since they stop taking a high-fat diet when they have diarrhea, it may not be evident in 40% of patients. This condition was reported in the 1950s, first time in Indonesia. It was reported by Zedima in Indonesia, and subsequently other countries reported it, including India. The disease has actually been from India. The stool elastase in this patient was low, indicating normal is more than 200, indicating that there was severe option in this patient. Now, this is largely lean BMI, no signs of insulin resistance, low C-peptides. It's always better to do a CT than an ultrasound. This is the findings. Dilatation. If they cross the age of 40. Now, it has been reported largely in the tropics, and that is why the preceding malabsorption with pancreatitis is called tropical pancreatitis. How do we treat them? They enlarge insulin and they fat, the enzyme supplements which contain lipase to help in fat. So autonomic dysfunction is common as reported by our studies. Micronutrient dysfunction is common. And they also, so these are the features that we see in. One thing which we did is we looked at the resting energy expenditure with indirect calorimetry, and they had very high patients. Why was that? And the paradox is, even though that the alpha cells are destroyed, they had high glucagon levels. And high glucagon actually drives mitochondria to burn more energy. And this is very important because when you treat them, you need to give them a very high carbohydrate diet, more than 3,000 calories, give them insulin, and you give them enzyme supplements. So all three things need to be done. This is the study where we proved that they have high glucagon levels, and you might wonder why the glucagon levels are high in these patients. The reason is, it's because of the fact that they are prone for production of glucagon from the intestine, from the L cells, extra pancreatic production of intestine rather than from the alpha cells of the pancreas. So it's an important cause for lean diabetes. You must look for it even in your country. Autonomic dysfunction is common, osteoporosis is common. Hypoglycemia may be initially produced by the high glucagon levels, but it dwindles later on. you need pancreatic enzyme supplements, and you need insulin treatment. Next, I'll come to the monogenic beta cell dysfunction. What is the classical monogenic dysfunction? And there are 14 types of the MODIs, but I'm not going to talk about each one of them. The age of onset is classically less than 25 years. So missed family history, the autosomal dominant inheritance pattern, and usually they are non-insulin requiring. They are generally thought to be monogenic and usually associated with the non-obese state, but I must say that in our series of monogenic diabetes, about 60% had a BMI more than 23 kg per meter squared, which is beyond the South Asian cutoff. Now, according to the WHO, these are the forms of monogenic diabetes which have been given importance. I have seen all these forms. In fact, I have subsequently seen the forms P3 Hybrix syndrome as well. And I'll talk a little bit about some of these conditions. Now, in the British literature, or rather the European literature, the glucokinase mutation is the commonest. It classically presents only with fasting hyperglycemia. But what we have studied in South Asia, Sri Lanka, India, and Nepal, we have found that these forms, MODI 1 and 3 and ABCC8, MODI 12 are the commonest form. So what we see in our population is actually quite different from what is seen in the European and American populations. So this is the initial work done with next generation sequencing way back in 2013. Maturity onset diabetes of the young in India, a distinctive mutational pattern, and this is what we found. A few examples. Here is a 23-year-old male, 3-generation family history, and you can see over here mutation HNF4 alpha positive, and in addition to that, so basically this patient will respond well to oral anti-diabetic agents. On a small dose of gliclazide, he did very well. 8-year-old girl over here at the top, you can see over here, this is a 3-generation family history. Fasting glucose is high, and this is a very strong family history, as you can see over here. All the first cousins have, many of them have young onset diabetes, many uncles and aunts. This is treated only with diet, the glucokinase of MODI 2. The next one is MODI 5, a patient who came with renal cysts and diabetes, young onset with so many cysts, and this is MODI 5. 2-month-old baby girl, frequent micturition, poor weight gain, no history of diabetic ketoacidosis, glucose levels elevated. This patient has a KCNJ mutation, MODI 13, responds to massive doses of glibenclamide. Can you imagine giving such huge doses of a sulfonylurea to a 2-month-old baby, but they respond very well and they do not need insulin treatment. Right. So sulfonylureas are important for treating monogenic beta cell forms of diabetes, but the important thing here to understand is that they have different forms of sulfonylureas to be given for different kinds of MODIs. For example, MODI 3, we give very low doses of sulfonylureas. The sulfonylurea of choice is glibenclamide, 2.5 mg once a day. Here, MODI 1, standard dose of the sulfonylureas, 10 mg to 15 mg of glibenclamide. ABCC8, standard dose of sulfonylureas. And MODI 13, KCNJ 11, extremely high doses of sulfonylureas, 50, 60, 70 milligrams of glibenclamide per day. But they respond. We are the first group who reported digenic mutations. That means MODI was thought to be monogenic, but we know that it can be digenic, and here's MODI 6 and MODI 4 co-segmenting, and it's now in the international digenic disease database. So it's something else which you should bear in mind. You can have 2 MODIs in the same patient having a dose effect. Here is a classical MODI 5, HNF1 beta. This patient with Müllerian defects. You can see a bicornate uterus with cervical obstruction causing amenorrhea in a 16-year-old girl, and she has an atrophic pancreas and she has diabetes. 20-year-old male with recurrent respiratory tract infections, steatorrhea, extremely low BMI, and in genetic testing, it is CFTR positive cystic fibrosis. We have recurrent episodes of abdominal pain. And initially with acute pancreatitis, you can see the edema of the pancreas. All the workup was negative. Subsequently, shrunken pancreas, calcification. Currently, she's doing well on basal bolus therapy of insulin. Then later on, the 13-year-old dog came with extreme fatigue, recurrent states of migraine, and lactic acidosis with lactates more than 10. Biopsy of the muscle showing ragged red fibers, blooming of the globus pallidus. It's typical of a mitochondrial encephalopathy and myopathy. And here is a diagnosis of mitochondrial diabetes. So the mother has diabetes and pancreatitis, and the child who has a high enteroplasmy of mitochondrial mitosis shows presence of encephalopathy and myopathy. So this is the heterotypy of the diversity and the heterotypy of what you actually see with mitochondrial disease. When you have a small pancreas without calcification, there are enough disorders that you can see. This is the pancreatic genetic screening panel which our lab has developed. Dr. Aaron Chapla has developed this particular panel. Next, I'll talk about lipodystrophy. It's a rare condition. It is autosomal recessive, but it's very characteristic. Now, the three conditions which I told you, especially the first two, type 1 and the second one, that's pancreatic diabetes, come with low C-peptides. The beta cell dysfunction has a low C-peptide, but it's not as low as in type 1 or in pancreatic diabetes. And postprandially, when you give a sulfonylurea, the C-peptides rise. In lipodystrophy, here is an example. A young lady on insulin, huge doses, 400 units per day, more diabetic ketoacidosis, has hypertriglyceridemia from the age of 15 years, and large muscles and prominent veins. So you can see over here low BMI, and the triglycerides are very high. This is way above the normal limit, and the mother also has the same history. This is an XR showing a body composition which is very low. I don't have diabetes. My percentage body fat is around 22, and the young lady has a percentage body fat with diabetes which is very low. In type 2, the percentage body fat, very high C-peptides indicating insulin resistance. This is a partial lipodystrophy occurring familial partial lipodystrophy, an autosomal recessive condition. And here is another patient with stunting of growth, lack of subcutaneous fat, severe fatty liver. They are prone for this extreme fatty liver and hypertriglyceridemia in addition. This patient has complete lipodystrophy, a much more severe form. They can also have cirrhosis by the age of 20 or 25 years of age due to MAFL in these patients. The first form, which I told you, the partial lipodystrophy may respond to pioglitazone, or not respond to thiazolidinones. You need big doses of insulin. So here's our publication on this condition, this disorder of hereditary lipodystrophy, congenital lipodystrophy. C-peptides are invariably elevated. Moderate to severe hypertriglyceridemia C. Hepatic steatosis is present in all patients, and this is never seen in type 1 diabetes, very rarely ever seen in fibrocalcic pancreatic diabetes, and uncommon monogenic disorder. So here it is a prominent feature, and they can go in for cirrhosis early. The partial lipodystrophies respond to pioglitazone. Next, I'll go on to the Wolfram syndrome. The Wolfram syndrome is another condition which was thought to be uncommon, very rare, but we do see a fair amount. We need to look for 20-year-old gentlemen with insulin, also has frequent dripping of urine, managed this type center for many years. When he came to us, what we discovered is paradoxical. Despite the high glucose levels, the sodium were high. You should expect pseudo-hyponatremia. It was in fact elevated, and that gave us a clue. Despite the glycosuria, the urine osmolality was low, and the C-peptides in the fasting state were also low. So indicating a beta cell deficient condition also indicating that he had diabetes insipidus. So Wolfram's is diabetes mellitus, diabetes insipidus, optic atrophy, and deafness. That's a classical syndrome. The sister, who came with a more severe condition, normal and loss of vision, almost blind by 9 years of age. Once again, misdiagnosed as type 1, but the antibodies are negative in 20 years. Severe autonomic dysfunction and death. So, this patient, and you can see a 30 gene panel showing Wolfram syndrome positive. This is a type 1 Wolfram syndrome, the common form seen in 99%. But I would like to highlight the fact that many of these patients may come early. This is a publication in the JCM showing our series on Wolfram syndrome. You can see here they can have profound hearing loss, optic atrophy, and this atrophy of the pons and the midbrain in this patient. So, what is important to remember is that diabetes actually comes first in the adult onset form of this disease. And after 7 years, the optic atrophy comes. On the y-axis, you have the age of these patients, then the deafness, and later on other problems. So initially, they are misdiagnosed as type 1 diabetes, and later on, the other problems actually occur. So when you have a patient who is C-peptide low, always check the antibodies and always do an imaging of the pancreas, and if required, do genetic testing in these situations. HIV lipodystrophy, not difficult to diagnose. Patients are on combined antiretroviral therapy. We have looked at this in our studies. They come with mild insulin resistance, and when they were followed up over here, as you can see, they are found to have partial lipodystrophic features, but the resistance is not as severe as the congenital lipodystrophy. They slowly progress to diabetes with minimal complications in addition. Finally, I will come to the last
Pelanggan yang
condition,
kami hormati,
which
sesaat
you're
lagi
probably looking
kita akan
forward
tiba
to.
di stasiun Kuto Harjo.
Effect on diabetes,
Bagi Anda
type
yang
1
akan mengakhiri
type 5
perjalanan di
diabetes.
stasiun Kuto Harjo,
So, let me
persiapkan
just tell
diri
you,
Anda,
this condition
periksa
was
dan teliti
probably
kembali
far more
barang bawaan
common
Anda.
about 200
Untuk
to
keselamatan
400 years
Anda,
ago.
dilarang
There was
membuka
probably a
pintu
lot more
kereta sebelum
malnutrition
kereta api
and
berhenti
poverty
dengan
across the
sempurna.
world globally.
Terima kasih
Not that there
atas
isn't now,
kepercayaan Anda
but it was
pada
probably.
PT Kereta
And
Api
even in
Indonesia. Sampai jumpa di perjalanan
Lazarov
berikutnya.
actually described this
Dear
condition in Paris
passengers, in a few moments,
in
we
people
will
who were in
arrive
their
at
30s and 40s,
Kuto Harjo
and they had
Station.
diabetes. They were very lean,
If you end your
but
trip at
there was no insulin
Kuto
available,
Harjo
and they still
Station,
lasted for about 20
please
years.
prepare
That's not
yourself
type 1
and check your
diabetes.
belongings. For your own safety,
Subsequently,
it is forbidden
Jones
to
came to
open the train's
Jamaica
door
in
before the train completely
1965
stops.
and identified
Thank
this
you for
condition
choosing
and described it in
PT Kereta Api
Lancet in
Indonesia.
1955.
See you on the next trip.
The WHO actually put it into the classification in 1985. This is after a lot of debate over many years, and that's Jaspreet Bajaj and Ahuja, who worked hard to get it into the WHO classification. So you can see over here that this condition has been reported across the tropical areas again. Initially, they thought malnutrition also caused fibrocalculus pancreatic diabetes. We know that's not true anymore. But the classical protein deficient and the fibrocalcic pancreatic diabetes, and you can see that Indonesia has actually been covered in this map as well. So I think we need to start relooking for this condition once again. There was a large workshop, but subsequently by 1999, it was taken off the WHO classification because many Europeans and Americans felt there was no physiological proof, and this condition was basically type 2 who has lost a lot of weight, or type 1 who was poorly controlled. But subsequently, reviews by Charlotte Bovama from
Pelanggan yang
Rwanda
kami hormati, pintu
across
keluar
several
berada di
countries showed that
sebelah
this problem really
kanan
existed.
dari arah
We did this very
kedatangan
important
kereta.
physiological study in
Terima kasih.
2022, which I shall
Dear
talk about.
passengers, the
So
exit
here's
door is on
an
the
example of a
right
patient,
of the
20-year-old
train's
gentleman
arrival.
came
you.
in 2018 for glycemic control. He basically had suboptimally controlled sugars, weight loss, no ketoacidosis, low middle class family, and he was born full term, but he was born low birth weight. You can see over here his examination is normal, but he had an extremely low body mass index. Now, his investigations are largely normal, other than the fact that his glucose was suboptimally controlled. no malabsorption, no autoimmune diabetes. This is what is called the mixed meal challenge test. I'm showing you only two values, the fasting C-peptide and the postprandial C-peptide. The fasting C-peptide is very low. The postprandial does show some response, indicating that insulin is deficient, but there is some response. And the ultrasound shows a normal liver without any fat as well. This is the body fat on the DEXA, showing that the percentage fat is very low once again. And comprehensive genetic testing for beta cell mutations are negative. There is no family history. So this patient is lean, has young onset diabetes, non-autoimmune, fasting insulinopenia, normal pancreatic structure, low total body fat, no genetic disorder, low birth weight, low socioeconomic status, qualifies for type 5 diabetes. And the patient is responding to sulfonylureas and gliptins in a combination dosage. Therefore, this patient, as you can see, what we reported is 50% of them actually respond to oral anti-diabetic agents. You can read these two articles about iniquity and non-communicable disease, iniquity and diabetes, and how things like multiple wars, famines, etc. over many, many years can actually cause this form of diabetes. So I'll switch now to the Barker hypothesis, reported by Hallis and Barker in 1991. In 1944, I can give an example of a war, the Second World War. Netherlands was under the Nazis, and women received only 400 calories of food per day. They gave birth to low birth weight babies, and subsequently these babies became obese, developed diabetes and hypertension by the time they were 30. This is called the thrifty phenotype, reported over here in Herefordshire, where low birth weight babies are prone for the problem. Babies who are big, large birth weight without maternal diabetes have a normal course and are actually quite healthy. The thrifty phenotype. Now, unfortunately, despite the progress of many things in South Asia, there is still a 15 to 20% prevalence of undernutrition, and we also have some of the lowest birth weights in the world. This is a study which I did about a decade and a half back, looking at low birth weight babies versus normal birth babies, doing state-of-the-art tests, the clamps for insulin sensitivity, energy expenditure, indirect calorimetry, and measuring fat in micro quantities in the liver and in the muscle. What we found is that the low birth weight babies had were shorter and were lighter. They had reduced muscle mass, slightly increased fat, slightly increased diastolic blood pressure, but there was no difference in terms of the insulin sensitivity because their BMIs at the age of 20 were only 19.5. But what we found was the low birth weight babies were, the boys at the age of 20 were programmed into taking a low protein diet. Now, we also found using NMR spectroscopy that the amount of fat in the liver was very low. In fact, 25% of them had absolutely no fat in the liver. Criteria for undernutrition related diabetes were devised in the 1980s, and they described this as a young person with low BMI, no ketoacidosis, and absence of any other condition causing diabetes. Two criteria over here which today we are moving on from and we do not actually include. Number one, they do not have to have a very high fasting glucose, and number two, they do not have to be on insulin therapy. So we know this from our experience and what we have worked on. These are examples of epidemiological studies in East Pakistan before it became Bangladesh in 1960. It was very common. Almost 30% of the population had insulinogenic, non-ketotic diabetes. More recently, it's been reported in Jamaica, it's been reported in Uganda, and also in Ethiopia as well, in fairly large series. And this is what we did with the Ugandan group. We found that they had low percentage body fat and also had extremely low C-peptides in about 60 to 70%. Let's look at the physiology. As early as 1965, patients with Kwashiorkor, when given a high-protein diet, improved their beta cell function. So, indicating that low-protein diets are a cause for beta cell dysfunction. In Jamaica, more recently, by Michael Bowen, he's shown in patients with marasmus that with the glucose tolerance tests, they had lower insulin levels and higher glucose levels when they were children. Studies from India on primates about 40 years ago have shown that exposure to low-protein diet can lead to insulin secretory defects and lower hepatic glucose disposal. Mice studies with malnutrition have shown that the islet cells are much smaller and do produce less insulin. Now this is our physiological study which we did in Vellore in India in collaboration with the Albert Einstein Institute in New York, wherein we compared 5 groups of patients and we did the same test which I told you about, the CLAMS, the NMR spectroscopy, the energy expenditure related studies, and also imaged all patients with an MRI of the pancreas and did genetic testing in all our patients. So these are the 5 groups we studied: type 1, type 2, lean controls, overweight controls, and low BMI diabetes, which is essentially what we call type 5 diabetes today. This is the CLAMP study. It's an extremely intense procedure. It's not something which is very enjoyable to do. It takes a lot of time, a lot of energy, but it tells you the insulin sensitivity very precisely. Low BMI diabetes were exquisitely insulin sensitive, no insulin resistance. We also looked at the beta cell secretion. The insulin secretion was low, not as low as type 1. This is the blue line, type 5 diabetes, and this is and the normal controls. The area under the curve, hyperglycemia is worse in type 1, is like this in type 5, and these are the normals again. So low BMI diabetes are insulinopenic, but not as insulinopenic as type 1 diabetes. The hepatic glucose output is low, much lower than any of the other conditions. Type 2 has the highest hepatic glucose output, which you know very well. Type 1 and type 5. The peripheral uptake of glucose is also is actually maintained quite well in patients who have this problem. This is presented in the ADA a couple of years ago, the American Diabetes Association, showing you the GLP-1 levels are actually very low in this condition. It's unique in these patients. So, summarizing, and you want to look at it from a perspective, look at this cartoon. These patients with type 5 diabetes, and this is published in Physiology recently, have low beta cell function, low hepatic glucose output, low insulin resistance in the muscle and in the fat, in the adipocytes, low total body fat, low GLP-1 secretion, low protein, the diet, low socioeconomic status. It's a kind of all low phenomena. Based on our research, it was highlighted in Scientific American in this article in 2023. And this year, in the month of April, Dr. Peter Schwartz, in fact, in January, he visited Vellore, and we had a group of 40 experts who discussed this condition and said that this condition needs to be studied separately and is different from type 1 or type 2 diabetes. In April, it was declared in the IDF, in the International Diabetes Federation, that this would be labeled as type 5 diabetes for the convenience of research and understanding of this condition better. We still need to understand a lot more as far as this condition is concerned. In September this year, in the Lancet Global Health, this is our publication which talks about the criteria and the consensus, and you can read about it. These are some of the features which we use over here for trying to determine this condition, and once again you can go through this article to understand it better. Interestingly, 50% of these patients respond to oral anti-diabetic agents, and that's very important information for the low resource or low socioeconomic status setting where you have difficulty in either procuring insulin or even teaching patients how to take insulin. Oral anti-diabetic agents work in 50%, unlike type 1 diabetes, unlike fibrocalcic pancreatic diabetes. So let's put this into a cartoon perspective. The life course evolution, if you're born low birth weight and you have overnutrition postnatally, you'll end up with classical type 2 diabetes. If you're born low birth weight and you continue to have undernutrition postnatally, you develop type 5 diabetes. This is how, yeah.
You only have 5 minutes left.
Yeah, I'm almost through. Thank you. So let me conclude. This is an algorithm which I'm giving over here to, in a low resource setting, what you need to do. Take a good history, draw a pedigree chart, ask for steatorrhea, abdominal pain, family history, draw and features of insulin resistance. Measure C-peptides, they help you differentiate the conditions. Measure GAD antibodies to rule out type 1 diabetes. Image the pancreas, preferably with a CT scan. In type 1 diabetes, you have low C-peptides, GAD positive will be there. Fibrocalculus, low C-peptides, antibodies negative, but pancreatic structural problem. Monogenic beta cell dysfunction, genetic testing positive, intermediate C-peptides. Lipodystrophy, high C-peptides, severe insulin resistance, NAFLD is prominent and genetic testing positive. Wolfram's syndrome, genetic testing positive with the other phenotypic features. HIV lipodystrophy features with mild insulin resistance. And of course, I've told you about type 5 diabetes. So type 5 is a distinct metabolic entity, and I've told you the clinical features. Antenatal and postnatal undernutrition in different degrees are responsible for the condition. You need to consider the differential diagnosis, which I mentioned, and future directions in terms of research. This is a huge area in countries like yours and mine, where we need to do a lot of research in this condition. I'd like to thank my collaborative agencies and funding agencies for all the support given over the years. A lot of people, some of whom are not figuring in this list of photographs, who have helped and worked with me over the years in doing all this research. Thank you for your patient listening. I'd be very happy to answer any questions.
Okay, thank you very much, Professor Nehal, for the insightful presentation about epidemiological exquisites, differential diagnosis of lean diabetes, malnutrition in diabetes, and the road of type 5 diabetes. It was very wonderful. And to the participant, let me remind you again, if you have any question regarding to the topic that had been presented by Professor Nehal, you can ask away during the Q&A session later on. So please prepare your best question. And now for the next session, we turn to our local expert who will bring these concepts home to Indonesia. It is my privilege to introduce Professor Dr. Aman Bakti Pulungan, Spesialis Anak, Subspesialis Endokrin, FAAP, FRCPI, FIAP. He is a distinguished pediatrician renowned for his leadership in child health and endocrinology. And Professor Aman will be explaining about diabetes type 5 and its connection to malnutrition in Indonesia, the local classification of diabetes in children, including the diagnostic tools, initial management strategies, and key complications with prognosis. And his remarkable background, Professor Dr. Aman Bakti Pulungan is a professor of pediatrics and senior consultant in pediatric endocrinology at Fakultas Kedokteran Universitas Indonesia. He is a former head of the Indonesian Pediatric Society, or IDAI, from 2010 to 2000. Pediatric Association and Asia Pacific Pediatric Endocrine Society, and also former executive director of the International Pediatric Association. And currently he is a member of executive commitment of IPA, project leader of Changing Diabetes in Children, and also head of Yayasan Kesehatan Anak Global. And with over 30 years in clinical practice and research, he has published over 100 scientific articles and book chapters, as well as being a driving force in various fields, especially in newborn screening programs and childhood diabetes. And he also a founder of Ikatan Keluarga Penyandang Diabetes Anak, Yayasan Keluarga Hiperplasia Adrenal Bawaan, or KHAKI, Forum Keluarga Osteogenesis Imputa, or FOSPA, dan Yayasan Kesehatan Anak Global. He also holds prestigious honors such as honorary membership of Turkish National Pediatric Society, honorary fellowship of Royal College of Physicians of Ireland, honorary Fellowship of Indian Academy of Pediatrics, International Fellow of American Academy of Pediatrics, Advocacy and Lifetime Achievement in Pediatrics Award in 2024 from EPA or UNEPSA, and also both Lifetime Alumni Achievement Award and Distinguished Alumni Award from the Faculty of Medicine of Universitas Sumatera Utara. So without further ado, I invite Professor Aman to commence his presentation. Professor Aman, the floor is yours.
Terima kasih. Saya karena tadi saya tanya audiensnya ini semua lokal, saya bahasa Indonesia aja ya.
Baik dokter.
Dan PPT saya juga saya buat dalam bahasa Indonesia. Saya rubah ya. Kemarin tuh udah saya bilang sebetulnya topiknya ini saya rubah. Kenapa? Saya tadi dengar Prof. Thomas dong bicara banyak soal berbicara soal DM tipe 5. Modi, saya hanya aja menyinggung sedikit. Kenapa saya rubah topiknya? Karena kita akan berbicara masalah anak. Dan kemarin saya ketemu dengan Pak Menkes juga. Kita ada CKG, semua ada tahu ada CKG ya. Nah dari CKG itu sudah ada 4 juta anak yang dites untuk diabetes screening. Dari 4 juta anak itu 160 ribuan itu prediabetik. Ini anak ya. Dan 4 ribuan itu hiperglikemi, jadi diabetik. Dan Jawa Tengah dan Yogyakarta ini salah satu yang paling tinggi. Nah, saya tidak mau kita cerita Modi, karena Modi itu berbeda. Tetapi ketika kita dapat type 1 banyak yang meninggal. Type 2 juga kita mulai banyak jadinya. Jadi saya buat awareness, tadi saya tanya, dan saya kalau setiap tahun itu bicara untuk kegawatan dalam diabetik, kalau PLT lulusan dokter di FKUI, dan saya selalu mengajar mengenai ketoasidosis, dan saya harapkan semua dokter, dan tadi saya tanya juga ada koas di sini, ada yang akan internship, tidak boleh luput itu kalau ada kasus kegawatan dalam diabetes. Jadi saya kenali lebih dini dan optimalisasi akses pelayanan yang equitable. Maaf, topiknya saya rubah memang. Kasus seperti ini, kita banyak dapat kasus seperti ini. Datang anak nanti kalau sudah di IGD umur 12 tahun 5 bulan, perempuan dari Bogor. Keluhan utamanya sesak nafas semakin berberat sejak 8 jam sebelum masuk rumah sakit. Nah, somnolen, sesak ada, dan lain-lain seperti ini datanya. Tentulah kalau jaga di IGD kita tahu yang seperti ini, dan juga tekanan darahnya mulai menurun, nadi meningkat, pernapasan kusmau. Nah, kita lihat dari datanya ini, ya, ini pH-nya sudah turun, ya, dan hasil O3-nya 2,7, ada keton urin, dan juga hiponatremi, nanti bisa juga nanti akan hipokalemi. Jadi sebagai dokter, tanda-tanda kegawatan kita harus paham, dan juga menginterpretasi laboratorium ini kita harus paham. Dan sebetulnya kalau sudah dilatih, ya, nanti tadi saya tanya ada berapa dokter anak di UI, katanya ada 4, tapi yang ikut cuma 1. Betul ya? Harusnya 4 ikut nih kalau saya bilang. Karena saya pengen latih, saya tanya ada nggak rumah UI? Ada katanya. Nah, saya mau nanti rumah sakit UI ini dalam mungkin tahun depan sudah ada klinik diabetesnya kalau bisa, kalau saya bilang. Jadi tidak dirujuk lagi ke Sarjito atau dirujuk kemana-mana. Jadi kalau dapat pasien diabetik ini, sebaiknya kita tanganin emergensinya dulu. Setelah itu kalau mau konsultasi online boleh. Diagnosisnya ketoasidosis berat dengan dehidrasi berat. Nah, hal seperti ini banyak sekarang pada saat pandemi juga, dan ketika luput ataupun tidak bisa melihat tanda-tanda emergensi ini, ya anaknya bisa meninggal tentunya. Ya, kita lihat DM, peningkatan glukosa darah semua, ya, defek produksi mekanisme insulin, ada DM tipe 1, defisiensi insulin absolut disebabkan oleh destruksi sel beta, ya, tipe diabetes pada anak paling umum di Indonesia, ya, tipe 1. Modi bagus, nanti saya jelaskan dengan Modi, ya. Dan di RSCM Prof Dante juga Wamen lagi membuat mencari gennya ini, dan sudah ada ketemu. Tetapi kalau saya bilang jangan sampai yang emergensi ini tidak paham yang tipe 1. Dan seringkali penegakan diagnosis itu terlambat. Pasien datang dalam kondisi berat dan KAD di mana dapat meningkatkan kematian. Ini yang jadi masalah. Nah, sekarang kita lihat kriterianya, tipenya, klasifikasi. DM tipe 1, ini bisa dilihat, tipe diabetes paling umum, KAD sering dicetuskan. Kalau bisa, kalau awareness sudah tinggi, jaga IGD, banyak anak datang dengan banyak minum, kencing dan lain-lain, cek atau nanti sudah CKG, kalau bisa tidak ada lagi KAD. DM tipe 2, ya kita lihat kriterianya. Nah, DM tipe lain-lain kita tidak membahas gini tipe gestasional, karena ketika dia sudah hamil, walaupun dia umur 17-18, kita tidak anggap anak lagi secara undang-undang di sini. Jadi dia masuk tipe gestasional. Tipe lain ini tadi yang dibahas, ya, monogenic type, ada MODY, ada beberapa type dari tipe 5 dan lain-lain. Kalau saya bilang bagus, kalau saya menganggap itu nice to know. Tapi jangan sampai paham MODY atau tipe 5 tapi tidak paham tipe 1. Ketika emergency, saru nih apa yang harus dilakukan. Ya, defek genetik, gangguan pankreas, endokrinopati, diabetes terinduksi zat obat bisa, ya, diabetes karena talasemi juga bisa dan lain-lain, dan diabetes yang dimediasi imun yang jarang terjadi. Ini bisa, ini kriterianya. DM masalah di dunia pada saat ini yang meninggal 7 juta orang. Kita masih banyak dapat yang meninggal bukan karena DM-nya, tetapi karena komplikasi jantung, ya, bisa ginjal dan lain-lain. Tapi kita juga bahwa banyak kalau misalnya dia masuk ICU dan 1,2 juta anak mengidap DM tipe 1 di dunia, tapi yang tidak terdeteksi lebih banyak daripada angka ini. Di global ini kita lihat ya, sampai 20 tahun. Jadi dia tidak masuk kriteria MODY, jarang bersinggungan, terutama kalau 5 yang 6 tahun, karena kan majority onset diabetic of the youth. Ya, itu kriterianya dulu. Walaupun bisa saja secara genetiknya sudah mulai di. Ya, kita lihat masalah kita apa? Sosioekonomi, kurangnya cakupan asuransi nasional. Sekarang insulin tidak ada, jadi tidak boleh ada, saya dengar lagi kalau ada konsultasi dan lain. Saya dapat kabar di Aceh karena banjir masalah di insulin, di Padang juga karena apa, kulkas juga, listrik dan lain-lain jadi rusak. Biaya yang tinggi, ya, geografis juga kurangnya fasilitas layanan, terutama daerah rural, apalagi kalau daerah banjir seperti sekarang, bencana alam di Sumbar, Sumut dan Aceh, dan itu biasa rumah sakit bednya, ada klinik anaknya, harus bisa melayani diabetes, jangan dirujuk setelah acara ini. Kalau misalnya ragu-ragu, bisa konsultasi ke CDIC nanti. Bisa dilihat ada IG-nya dan lain-lain kita, atau konsultasi ke dokter endokrin anak yang di Jogja, ada Prof. Madarina dan Dokter Yuda, ya. Sistem kesehatan terbatasnya kualitas sistem dan disrupsi mayor, konflik, perang, pandemi dan bencana alam. Ya, kita lihat kemarin. Pandemi dan Covid kita lihat pada saat itu terganggu. Logistik, insulin strip, dan lain-lain. Dampak ekonomi, kontrol glikemik yang buruk, dan mengurangi akses layanan dan lain-lain ini. Nah, kita bicara sekarang, sedikit saya singgung, tadi sudah disinggung oleh pembicara sebelumnya, tapi saya takut pengertian interpretasi kalian ini jadi berubah. Dipikirkan pertama dulu MODY, ya. Saya lihat kenapa. Dari kita memakai, saya tidak tahu pembicara sebelumnya pakai konsensus semata, tapi kalau kita memakai di seluruh dunia, konsensus dari International Society Pediatric Adolescent Diabetic, dan saya pernah jadi medical council juga di sini. Kita lihat diabetes monogenik ini mencakup ya 2,5% sampai 1,5% dari semua kasus diabetes anak. Jadi kalau kita dapat tadi misalnya 4.000-an, 2,5% kita lihat berapa. Tapi sisanya itu tipe 1 dan tipe 2. Mungkin dari yang prediabetik ada juga. Tapi kita harus ada teknik diagnostiknya. Diabetes monogenik disebabkan oleh satu atau lebih defek pada satu gen atau lokus kromosom yang dikategorikan sebagai berikut: neonatal atau early onset. Ini monogenik ya, bukan yang modi kita bicara. Terus majority onset diabetic. Ini yang tadi dibahas ya, yang ada tipe 5 juga. Terus diabetes associated with extra pancreatic feature dan monogenic insulin resistant syndrome. Sindrom MODY merupakan diabetes monogenik yang ditandai dengan gangguan sekresi insulin dan defek minimal atau tanpa defek pada kerja insulin. Sebagian besar tipe MODY menyebabkan diabetes terisolasi karena itu dapat salah diagnosis ya. Dapat salah diagnosis sebagai tipe 1 dan tipe 2. Jadi kita harus lihat jadinya. Tapi harus cek gennya untuk pastinya. Di IMERI, di RSCM itu BGSI sudah mulai ini. Dan kita lihat riwayat diabetes pada keluarga dan subtipe genetik MODY-nya harus kita lihat. Ini kita lihat most important subtype MODY yang terkait dengan clinical feature ya. Ada datanya di sini kita lihat. Dan kebanyakan subtipe MODY akan memiliki fenotip diabetes terisolasi atau hiperglikemi pada puasa ringan yang stabil, tetapi MODY memiliki fitur tambahan seperti kista ginjal atau disfungsi eksokrin pankreas. Disarankan untuk menetapkan diagnosis molekular MODY dengan tepat karena menghindari kesalahan diagnosis sebagai tipe 1 dan tipe 2. Jadi harus dieksklusi betul dia tipe 1, tipe 2-nya. Dapat memberikan prognosis, risiko komplikasi ya, dan juga keterbatasan kesempatan kerja dan lain-lain, dapat memungkinkan prediksi risiko dan juga menghemat biaya jika individu yang dipilih dan tepat di screening. Karena terapinya berbeda, tetapi ini ingat, pada anak mau tipe 1, mau tipe 2, mau MODY, ketika HbA1c-nya di atas 9, kita pakai insulin dulu. Jadi saya katakan kalau tadi dapat yang 4.000 screening tadi hiperglikemi dan diabetes, kemungkinan datang ke tempat kalian praktek atau ke tempat kalian jaga di rumah sakit atau ke rumah sakit UI, cek ketika gula darahnya positif tinggi, HbA1c-nya di atas 9, belum tahu tipenya yang dari CKG ini, berikan langsung insulin plus metformin. Ketika dia di bawah 9 HbA1c-nya, kita mulai dengan metformin dulu. Nanti setelah itu baru kita pisah-pisahkan ini yang mana dia. Tetapi secara emergensi, secara awal langsung diterapi ya. Tipe 1 kita lihat di Indonesia. Jumlahnya segini, ini publikasi saya, data dari 2017 sampai 2019, pada saat itu baru 1.200-an. Dan tahun 2020 nih saya publikasi. Nah, tapi apa yang menjadi concern kita? 71% anak DM tipe 1 ini terdiagnosis dengan KAD. Jadi dari 1.200-an ini bisa dibayangkan kan, 70% itu, hampir 1 jutaan itu masuk dengan KAD. Kalau kalian tidak paham, kita tidak paham, dokter tidak paham, meninggal dong. Pasti banyak yang meninggal ada, atau bukan banyak, ada yang meninggal. Jadi yang data ada terdaftar ini adalah yang tidak meninggal. Jadi tidak boleh yang ikut acara ini setelah ini tidak paham KAD kan. Kalau negara yang bagus itu harusnya KAD-nya di bawah 20%, kayak Kuwait, Jepang dan lain-lain itu, bahkan di bawah tidak sampai 10% ya. Nah, DM tipe 1 sering terlambat. Kita tidak bisa membedakan, tadi dikatakan C-peptide, antibody, ini kan belum ditanggung asuransi. Dan kurangnya tenaga kesehatan. Saat ini hanya 53 dokter ahli endokrin pada saat ini publikasi. Dan rendahnya kesadaran masyarakat terhadap DM tipe 1. Bahkan saya diminta bicara DM tipe 5 di UI.
FKUII, bukan tipe 1. Jadi berarti kan kesadaran dari panitia ini masih kurang terhadap DM tipe 1, maaf ya. Ya kan? Karena burdennya ini tipe 1 ini yang paling berat, tapi saya pikir saya beranikan aja, saya tukar aja topiknya. Karena ini yang di depan mata yang bisa membuat kita bermasalah. Masalah saat ini ya, tuntutan untuk peningkatan kualitas hidup dapat menimbulkan masalah lain, komplikasi kronik, dan harus meningkatkan kelangsungan hidup. Kita lihat di sini. Nah, pengelolaan DM pada anak dan remaja. Jadi ada 5 pilar kita lihat di sini. Yang pertama insulin. Tipe 1. Tidak boleh tidak harus insulin. Nah, pengaturan diet, pola makan, olahraga, edukasi termasuk apa yang harus kita lakukan ini dalam mengedukasi pasien, baru kontrol glikemik. Nah, saya tanya ke semua hadirin yang ini, semuanya ini bisa dipelajari apa tidak? Bisa kan? Tapi kenapa masih banyak pasien DM ini dirujuk? Kenapa? Awareness kan? Dan ketidakberanian, merasa tidak kompeten. Ya? Nanti bisa lapor ke staf saya yang menghubungi staf saya, siapa namanya dokter anak yang ada di FKUI. Kalau belum latihan DM itu harus kita latih semua mereka itu. Harus ada segera. Jadi tujuan pelaksanaannya ini menjaga pertumbuhan, perkembangan, kontrol metabolik, komplikasi akut, aspek, meningkatkan kesadaran, memberikan dukungan multidisiplin dan kolaborasi. Ya, pengelolaan DM dengan pertimbangan khusus berdasarkan situasi keluarga, kondisi sekolah, aktivitas fisik, pola makan, situasi sosioekonomi, faktor kebudayaan, dan kondisi komplikasi medis lainnya. Ini yang perlu kita pahami. Tetapi sebetulnya kita menjadi dokter, kalau toh tidak pasien DM, ini kan kita harus paham semuanya. Ketika ini kita tidak mau belajar, inilah kejadiannya yang kita dituntut dan lain-lain. Dan ketika kita dituntut, masuk ke ranah hukum, kita juga ribut. Emergensi harus dilihat. Siapa yang jaga di sini? Kalau ada konsultannya, di sini dokter internship, dokter anaknya. Kalau ada curiga DM atau ketoazisis, panggil dokter anaknya, harus melihat. Biar diakses, baru dirujuk. Jangan sampai dia besok datang, dokternya pasiennya meninggal. Nah, dokter yang menerima langsung melihat bagaimana keadaan ini semua dari awal. Jadi kita tahu, walaupun dia emergensi kita paham. Pengelolaan awal dan edukasi dapat dibagi fase, 2 fase. Stabilisasi dan pelatihan pengobatan awal dalam beberapa hari pertama. Kalau tidak mampu di rumah sakit UII, boleh dikonsultasikan untuk edukasi, tapi setelah itu kembali. Pelatihan pengelolaan diabetes lanjutan yang dirancang untuk masing-masing pasien dan keluarganya. Kalau anak, orang tuanya dua-dua kerja bagaimana nih? Kalau dia nyuntik di sekolah bagaimana? Kan berbeda-beda jadinya. Insulin, ini ada publikasi juga, ini kan survei kami, 20% itu menolak, rendahnya motivasi, faktor tenaga kesehatan juga, faktor lingkup sistem, isu keuangan dan lain-lain, laboratorium dan lain-lain seperti itu. Nutrisi harus kita atur, tapi tanpa DM saja kan kita mengatur nutrisi. Harus ada sayur, ya, karbo kita, ya, dairy produk, susu, daging rendah lemak, distribusi karbohidrat. Kita harus paham makanan kita bahwa harus ada karbohidrat, lemak, dan protein. Harusnya MBG juga begini. Komposisinya itu. Ya, pengaturan dosis insulin berdasarkan konsumsi karbohidrat. Aktivitas fisik boleh. Pasien kita ada yang menjadi atlet SEA Games sekarang. Jadi berarti apa? Anak DM bisa menjadi atlet elit. Ada yang atlet Olimpik, ada yang Halle Berry, ya, bintang film juga kan. Jadi tidak ada masalah kalau saya bilang. Jangan dokternya yang takut kalau pasiennya berani kan. Edukasi fase pertama kita lihat, fase kedua dan penyuluhan. Ini yang paling penting. Ya. Ini semua bisa dipelajari nggak? Bisa. Ini siapa yang melakukan? Dokter dan tenaga kesehatan.